Go Army, beat Navy. Go Army, beat Navy. News update. Senator Tim Kaine, who only yesterday was standing before a mandatory formation of junior ROTC cadets to explain to them his position against the president, has recently doubled up his efforts enlisting retired Navy officer and former Senator Jim Webb to explain what he calls a complicated situation. But 6 hours before the New York Times and BBC were able to put out a story that relied upon satellite imagery to confirm that the Iranian government had in fact attacked the Ukrainian airline flight PS-752, killing 167 passengers and flight crew on board, which included 89 Iranians, its own citizens, 63 Canadians, and citizens of the United Kingdom, Germany, and Afghanistan. We posted on social media the intelligence assessment based upon information available in the open source that the airline had been attacked by a surface-to-air missile system based upon commonly known scientific principles like Newton's law of inertia and basic flight operations, based upon aerodynamic principles that we have used in air travel since the Wright brothers' first flight at Kitty Hawk. But now, with some great reluctance and hesitation, officials in the Iranian government, with which Senator Kaine and Warner do not want to go to war against, and who former Ambassador Don Beyer wanted to give a nuclear capability to build an offensive weapon with a strike capability against Israel, our best friend and closest ally in the Middle East, have conceded that they may have accidentally launched a missile that happened to kill their own citizens. So let's look at this statement from a country that prompted Tim Kaine to address a formation of junior ROTC cadets just yesterday in a lecture for over an hour, well beyond the standard class period, and essentially radicalizing them for future incitement to mutiny and sedition, while also unlawfully lobbying to active duty military personnel who were present during this event. If someone were to ask you, as a normal citizen, what a major airport was, you would, more likely than not, find it a no-brainer to pick out in a police lineup your major airport. And the one in Tehran, the capital of Iran, if you did not know, just happens to look like this. Very distinct from all other terrain features in the area, especially to persons trained in working in tactical intelligence, who assist targeting during offensive military operations like taking down planes. A capability that my nemesis, Mike Norell, had said in September 2016 the Iranians had no capability to do, or rather ISIS had no capability to do when he was selling his book about how Al-Qaeda was the greatest threat. But I think that we can agree that an airport is unmistakable, especially when it is in your own country. Now, most tactical military intelligence personnel go through extensive training to become familiar with various types of aircraft, both friendly and foe. But even without any military training at all, most people who have seen a movie or a television show would be able to immediately pick out a United States military fighter, especially our "you lost that loving feeling" Top Gun fans. You may not be able to distinguish between an F-15, an F-16, or an F-18, but you know a fighter when you see one, like good art. The same thing for a bomber aircraft. You may, like Don Beyer, accidentally take the shuttle to the Midwest and land in Iowa during a crisis in the Middle Eastern countries of Iran or Iraq. But you are in serious trouble if you find yourself waking up surprised aboard a B-1 bomber, a B-52 or other tactical or strategic bomber. I am sure we can agree. Believe it or not, no self-respecting bomber pilot ever says bombs away. Just to let you know. But Tim Kaine recently posted an opinion editorial from his predecessor and friend Jim Webb, a Navy man, a Navy officer that many voters found highly informative as it described what he called a Pandora's box, which has nothing to do with the jewelry store in the mall, in case you did not know. If you don't know that, it's really not important, because it's only a phrase that Jim used to make you think he was intelligent, and apparently for some, it worked. But Jim, a Navy veteran and officer, does accurately state that our military forces were located on military installations of our allied countries in the Middle East, which does not include Iran. So, according to the Iranian government officials, at the time that they accidentally killed their own citizens and many citizens from other countries like our northern neighbors in Canada, they were engaged in missile attacks engaging targets in another country far, far away. Far, far away, like the Star Wars film. Galaxy far, far away. Is that clear? Is that clear? Another country far, far away. Have you ever woke up surprised to find that you thought you were shooting missiles at one country and then discovered that you were actually launching missile attacks at your own national airport? Well, that is what Iranian government officials who want a nuclear capability have said, and former Ambassador Don Beyer and his colleagues agree. So, taking this down now to a tactical level, we must assume that for attacks against targets in our allied nations, the Iranian forces were using what are called ballistic missile systems with a surface-to-surface capability. And many who still recall the brief war in the Gulf called Desert Storm that even had a song may recall the Scud attacks. That is a surface-to-surface missile system, because it is launched from a platform on the ground or surface to engage another target on the ground or surface. Pretty self-explanatory. In order to acquire and engage a target on the ground with a ballistic missile system, you have to know where it is on a military map, and based on the coordinates you plot, a trajectory and fire. The process is entirely based upon intelligence preparation performed in due diligence before the attack, and if the homework is correct, the missile will land on the right target and achieve the desired tactical result. Fire for effect, too easy. But according to recent statements by the Iranian government, apparently while engaged in the attack, just like in the movie Courage Under Fire, when Denzel Washington's character, Lieutenant Colonel Nate Sterling, realized that something was wrong because their tank convoy had been infiltrated by the enemy. Remember that big turd on your light scene? The Iranian intelligence officers in the Fire Direction Control Center say that they believed that the Americans were retaliating against them from the rear, and apparently from a base in their own country. Located pretty close to their nation's capital and in the vicinity of their own airport. Looking at a map, it is alarming to any intelligence professional that an enemy might get all the way to Tehran with an offensive strike capability that was only noticed while they were launching Scud missiles on another country. Not to mention what airport security must look like if they didn't recognize that they had air defense missile systems set up not far from their runway. It's kind of like, maybe they were thinking about that scene in Die Hard 2. It's kind of like Russians showing up on election day to engage in labor-intensive exercise of altering the outcome of an election. Like your own national airport, you should be able to see it immediately, and no one should wake up surprised and find themselves 3-4 years later in impeachment proceedings. But that is the Iranian story, and they are sticking with it. But to react to this new tactical contingency of an airborne attack, they could not rely on Scuds or any surface-to-surface missile system, but rather had to engage their air defense assets or surface-to-air missiles. or SAMs, as you may have heard the professionals say, because you were engaging a moving airborne target. A little bit more difficult to hit. You cannot plot a coordinate and shoot. And in most cases, you cannot maintain line of sight to lace the target and engage. And this is not the line of sight air-to-air battle you see in the movies when you lock on the target and hear the alarm. You can tell the Iceman that he's dead. No, this is not that. A surface-to-air missile using heat-sensing technology to locate a target at a distance. And with these thermal sensors, they lock on to the hottest thing on the horizon. That becomes the big thing for the heat sensor, which, unlike in a line-of-sight engagement, is not the large fuselage. That would be something easy for you to see, with 167 humans warming up at 98 degrees. But the powerful jet engine burning highly flammable jet fuel that burned so hot that it began the decay of the infrastructure at the Twin Towers during the 9/11 attacks. In fact, jet fuel is so flammable that if a pilot suspects that he will have to make a crash landing, he will actually take the deliberate step to dump out all of the fuel to avert the potential for a fireball. But according to Iranian officials, they let the Scud guy keep firing on targets in another country to maintain the attack against the Americans, while they woke up the SAMs guy to destroy an enemy target that suddenly appeared behind them in their rear in their nation's capital. These are just the facts as they have reported them, and which some of our highly placed Democrat leaders agree. And when they looked up, when the Iranians looked up, they did not see Slim Pickens waving a cowboy hat and riding yippee-ki-yay style on a nuclear payload dropping from a B-52. They did not see Maverick and the Iceman engaged in air-to-air combat. No, they saw an aircraft taking off from their own national airport. A very identifiable image, which no one except a moron mistakes, and it happened to look like any other commercial airliner that may have been taking off from a major airport in one of the 10 largest cities in the world, occupying 33,000 acres. But only one of 2 operational 4,000-meter runways, and 2 of 3 operating terminals, servicing 35 airlines, which handled almost 5 million passengers in 2013, as well as almost 100,000 tons of cargo on almost 40,000 aircraft movements. The 11th busiest airport in the world. Yes, but they are telling us that they look back at this airport that only has 1 runway with aircraft taking off all day long and found cause for alarm. And according to Iranian government officials, that is exactly what occurred. And a former ambassador, a ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, a ranking member of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, as well as a former U.S. Senator and Navy officer have signed off on that argument. So, there you have it, folks. The explanation may defy Newton's laws of inertia and everything we know about flight travel, but that's the way it is. Yeah, folks, it ain't exactly rocket science. Go Army, beat Navy. But Jim, if I ever need to get a recommendation on whether or not Mr. Bubble is the best bath wash, I'll let you know. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb. Honest.